Welcome back. Chapter 12. What's the matter with those men? Lavina whispered in my ear. Which men? I asked, looking around. I was finding so much to stare at inside the high walls of Fort Hall. Okay, I'm going to stop here for just a second and go to my map in the front. Fort Hall. Let's see, it's number 8 on our map, and they're getting a lot farther to their destination. They're about halfway, looks like. Okay. There was the fort itself, built of sun-baked adobe, with a wide square dirt yard in the middle, and the people, a few soldiers in uniform, some whisky, rough-looking mountain men, Indians belonging to the Snake and Shoshone tribes. So, we'd been told, and small group of travelers like ourselves stopped to shoe horses and trade for food and supplies. But the thing I couldn't keep my eyes away from was the houses facing the square. Solid walls and doors and windows, and inside, most likely, tables spread with cloths and cupboards filled with china dishes and real bedsteads. With a little twinge of pain, like a toothache that kept returning, I thought again of our house back in Arkansas. Mother's roses blooming next to the front door, a friendly curl of smoke rising from the chimney. That put me in mind of the meeting house and the schoolhouse, and how much I had been missing my studies. I had a sudden sharp longing to forget about Oregon, wherever it was, and stay right here. Those men, Lavina nudged me, pointing and giggling. They look so funny. 2 men in buckskin breeches, those are pants, were leading their horses toward the blacksmith. Though they were standing up, their breeches curved as if they were sitting down. It's not polite to point, Lavina, Father corrected her gently. But he, too, had a smile. It looks as if they were out in the damp and let their clothes dry while they were seated. And we had come from camp a mile away to buy extra linchpins for the wagon, as well as crackers, sugar, and maybe a little fresh milk. Our cow, Lily, had died 3 days ago from eating a poison weed. Mother, who seemed always tired now, was resting back in camp with Cynthia. You girls stay close to me, Father told us. Drinking in the rich smells of smoked meat, fish, tobacco, fur, skins, and red-hot iron of the blacksmith's fire, Lavina and I trailed after Father as he traded for the other things we needed. Afterward, my hands clutching a half-full pail of milk, we waited while we talked. He talked with Captain Powell and some other men in the cool shadows of the yard. Their voices buzzed on. The sun began to sink in the sky, and long shadows came creeping across the yard. I watched a small group of Indian women and children nearby. They were dressed in deerskin, decorated with red ribbons and porcupine quills and beads of many colors. Excuse me. And the women wore shiny brass bracelets in their arms and on their arms and rings on their fingers. The colors were bright against the dark brown skin and glossy black hair. They appeared friendly to me. Looking at a girl about my age playing with a fat baby, I wished suddenly that we spoke the same language so I could talk to her. It is settled then, I heard Father say, shaking hands with the giant of a man who had a bushy graying beard. We pull out at first light tomorrow, replied the man in a deep voice. That is how we learned that we were leaving Captain Powell's wagon train to join a smaller one led by this man, Captain Clark. Why? I asked Father on our way back to camp. I had felt so safe in Captain Powell's company, closed inside that big circle of wagons every night, with so many rifles to protect us. It's because of Mother, Father answered, not quite looking at me. You know, she has not been feeling very well. A smaller train can move faster and get us to Oregon sooner. Also, in a smaller train, if one of the families should have to stop, the rest will not go on without them. Something strange in his voice made me stop and take notice. What was the matter with Mother? I wondered. Was she not tired from traveling but truly sick? And was Father so concerned about her that he thought we might have to stop? Of course. The moment I saw her back at camp, rubbing her back as she straightened up from bending over the fire, I knew what it was. Mother was not sick. She was going to have a baby. Why hadn't I realized it in weeks ago? I had seen other women with thickening waists, faces pale and their eyes weary from too many miles of jostling in the wagons. And I had seen wagons suddenly halted along the trail so a baby could be born. Just a few nights ago, in fact, Mother and Mrs. Grant had gone to try to help a young woman in the Powell train who was having a difficult birth. I had heard them return very late, and Mother say to Father in a hollow voice, "She worked so hard, but the baby was born dead." A new baby. The idea unfurled in my mind like an opening flower. We were going to have a brand new baby in our family. Maybe it would be a boy this time. Father would like that. He was always telling people jokingly that he was surrounded by females. Lavina didn't know about the baby yet, and neither, of course, did Cynthia. Only I did. It was a secret, I thought, with a little rush of pleasure that I shared with Mother. Then I remembered the young woman whose baby had been born dead. That couldn't happen to Mother. This baby, our baby, was going to be born healthy and strong. I would help make it so. I promised myself by taking care of Mother. I would do more of the chores at meal times so she could rest and carry things so she wouldn't have to bend over. Smiling to myself, I went to lift the biscuit pan out of the fire. So she just decided she's going to stop fighting with her. She's going to do what she needs to do, and she's going to do more work to help out Mother because she doesn't want her to lose this baby. Okay, ready? Just after dawn the next day, our wagon and the Grances fell in behind the 8 others of the Clark train and the bright walls of Fort Hall. Like all other landmarks and campsites that in my mind's eye stretched out in a line going east all the way to Independence, faded slowly to nothing in the distance. Though large and powerful like a mountain around us, Captain Clark was quiet and easy in his ways. His wife, cheerful and tiny with bird-like bones, talked more than he did. Traveling with them was his sister, Mrs. McReynolds, a widow who had lost her husband along the trail. In her eyes I could see a glaze of grief, but she traveled along steadily and quietly, seeming determined to finish the journey they had started together. And there were about 5 McReynolds and 4 Clark children, who were in and out of each other's wagons so much that they all mixed together in my mind. Soon we came to the Snake River, a wandering greenish stream cut so deep into the rock that in many places we could only look at it, not get down to drink from it. We were to follow this river for the next 300 miles. We passed the American Falls, a beautiful tumbling torrent of water 50 feet high, and a few miles farther the Raft River. Here the trail that led to California veered off to the left. The Tedros party was headed that way, the storekeeper at Fort Hall told me, Father said. I thought of Sarah Jane trudging beside her wagon up that shallow valley toward a far-off mountain peak. Our ways had parted once again. They weren't really with them, but she just said, since they're going this way and we're going this way. If they would have been together, this is where they would have parted. And so it's kind of a symbolic kind of parting. Does that make sense? Okay. For several days after that, we traveled across dry, desolate country. As far as my eyes could see was nothing but hot yellow and sand and gray sagebrush. I gathered up the dry brush for Mother's fires, but it burned with a smell that was worse than buffalo chips. The sun scorched the top of our heads. Dust flew in clouds. Sometimes, from up on the spring seat, we could see neither Father nor the team. Was that dusty? At night, if we managed to find a camping place that had both water and a little grass, we were thankful. And if there were a few sticks of wood for a fire as well, we positively rejoiced. Our oxen were growing so thin that their bones stood out like sharp mountain ridges. Buck and Ben looked at Father with reproachful eyes as he yoked them to the wagon each morning. Lavinia and I felt so sorry for them that we tried to think of some way to help. One day, as the 2 of us were walking along next to the wagon, I spotted a little clump of green ahead. Look, Lavina, I said, pointing. Grass! She cried joyfully. She raced ahead and began pulling it up in big bunches. I ran after her. We had all we could carry. We walked back and held out handfuls of grass to Buck and Ben. Go on, have some, offered Lavina. Oxen could not smile. It was silly to think they could, but there was something close to it in their mild, dark eyes as they chewed gratefully on that sweet, soft grass. For days after that we gathered every little blade of grass we could find in our aprons and feed it to the oxen as we traveled along. Now, illness came to our wagon train again. It began with two of Mrs. McReynolds' children, 15-year-old Rebecca and 12-year-old George, who were stricken with mountain fever. They had aching muscles and rashes and high fevers. Soon some of the Clark children, as well as the others in the train, also had the sickness. It struck suddenly, and sometimes the fever rose so high that the victim would rave in delirium. Okay, we're going to stop here.